Hello guys, so welcome back. So today we shall be discussing the next topic in the Clostridial species, that is Clostridium botulinum, right? So all of you have heard about this Clostridium botulinum, right? So this Clostridium botulinum, one important thing which you have to remember is, out of all the toxins like diphtheria toxin, Shigella toxin, right? Clostridium tetani releasing tetanospasmin. So out of all the different toxins which are released by this bacteria, Clostridium botulinum toxin, which is also called as botulinum exotoxin, right? So this botulinum exotoxin is very toxic and the most powerful one. So if I ask you what is the most powerful neurotoxin, then it is botulinum exotoxin, which is released by obviously Clostridium botulinum, right? So again, we shall start from the basics, guys. So if you are watching, if someone is watching this video for the first time, if you haven't watched my lecture on Clostridium tetani, so if you're watching this for the first time, let us draw the classification, write down the classification again, right? So obviously, this is a gram-positive bacteria. All the Clostridial species are gram-positive rods. All the Clostridial species are gram-positive rods or bacilli, right? So obviously, this is a gram-positive organism. Now, this gram-positive organism, you basically divide into three types, right? So, some of them are called as bacilli, some of them are called as cocci, and some of them are called as branching filaments. Now, when you come across this bacilli, I told you it is a gram-positive rod, bacilli. Now, in this bacilli, there are in turn two types. Some of them can live with the presence of oxygen and they are called as aerobic organisms. Some of them die in presence of oxygen, or some of them can live in the absence of oxygen and they are called as anaerobic organisms, right? So we have got aerobic organisms. At the same time, we have also got anaerobic organisms. Now, coming to few aerobic organisms, what are the examples of few aerobic organisms? Is one is Listeria, right? So that is Listeria monocytogenes. All of you know that. Second one is the Bacillus. Bacillus in the sense, don't think the rod-shaped organisms and all. Obviously, it is a rod-shaped organism. In that, Bacillus in the sense, Bacillus anthracis, right? All of you know that. Next, third one is Corynebacterium, which is responsible for causing diphtheria, Corynebacterium diphtheriae. Now, all these organisms can live in presence of oxygen. Now, when you come to anaerobic organisms, in the list of anaerobic organisms, the first organism I want to mention is Clostridium. Clostridium, in the sense, there are different types of Clostridial species. All of you know that, like Clostridium tetani, Clostridium botulinum, Clostridium perfringens, Clostridium difficile. So all these different types of Clostridium species, all of them are anaerobic. It means they live in the absence of oxygen. They grow in the absence of oxygen. But keep in mind one thing, that if you are trying to provide oxygen to such organisms, they will die. Why? I'll tell you in a minute. But before that, let us list out the organisms. The second organism will be Propionibacterium. This will be the second organism. So this is the basic table which you all have to remember, that you know now that it is a gram-positive bacilli, which is an anaerobic organism, right? So let us list out the properties, guys. Let us list out the properties. Coming to the properties or the characteristic properties, all of you know the first thing, that it is a gram-positive organism and which is rod in shape. Second thing which you came to know, that this is an anaerobic organism. Right? And third important thing should always be regarding the shape, right? So what is the shape of this bacteria? Obviously it is a rod shape, but as far as exam point of view, the shapes are different, guys. Okay, as far as exam point of view, you have to know the shapes. So let me list down all the Clostridial shapes right now here itself in this particular topic, so that once after looking at this, when I go to the next bacteria, next Clostridial species, so you'll be better aware of all this, right? So let us look at the shapes. One is, We have got something called Clostridium tetani. Clostridium tetani, right? We have also Clostridium perfringens. Clostridium perfringens. We have got Clostridium botulinum, which we are discussing currently, and finally we have got Clostridium difficile. Now, coming to Clostridium tetani, what is the shape? Obviously, all of them are tennis racket shaped, right? So, but one very important thing, if this is called as the tennis racket, right? This is called as the tennis racket shaped, right? This is called as a tennis racket shaped, or also called as what? Drumstick appearance. Now, the red thing which I am showing you there, this red thing is called as what? This should be called as terminal spore. This should be called as terminal spore. So if I ask you in Clostridium tetani, where is the spore located? It is in the terminal point. That is why called as terminal spores. Now when you look at Clostridium perfringens, this is Clostridium perfringens. Where is the spore located? It is located here. So below the terminal part. So can I call it as subterminal spore? This is called as subterminal spore. Now, where are the spores located in Clostridium botulinum and difficile? All of you remember, only in Clostridium tetani, the spores are located on the top. That is why it is called terminal spore. But in the remaining variants, like Clostridium perfringens, botulinum and difficile, the spores are subterminal. So this is one of the important thing which you need to remember, right? Now, when we switch on to property number 4, all of you know that this Clostridium botulinum, it releases a toxin. Every bacteria releases a toxin, right? But what is this toxin called as? Obviously, it is an endotoxin or exotoxin. Obviously, it is exotoxin. And what type of exotoxin I told you before? It is called as botulinum exotoxin. This is called as botulinum exotoxin. What is the type of the toxin? This is called as botulinum exotoxin. And in the previous class, when I was discussing Clostridium tetani, I told you that Clostridium tetani releases some spores, and these spores are heat liable, right? So in the same way, why they are heat liable? Because within the center part of the spores, in the core, in the center region of the spore, there is an acid called dipicolinic acid. In the same way, why botulinum exotoxin is heat liable? Because of the same reason. So we got a point here that botulinum exotoxin is heat stable. Heat stable, right? So you might get a doubt that how many different types of botulinum exotoxins are there? Because as far as I know, Clostridium botulinum releases a toxin called botulinum exotoxin, which is responsible for causing food poisoning. But the thing which you really need to know is that botulinum exotoxins are 8 types. Botulinum exotoxins are 8 types. What are these 8 types? A, B, C1, C2, D, E, F, G. I don't think it will be difficult for you to remember. So these are 8 different types of botulinum exotoxins. These are 8 types of botulinum exotoxins. Out of these 8 types, you know one thing, that botulinum exotoxin causes food poisoning. Botulinum exotoxin causes what? It causes food poisoning. Food poisoning. But very few students know this, that botulinum exotoxin not only causes food poisoning, but it is also neurotoxic. It can even damage your nervous system. It can even damage your nerves and cause paralysis in your body. So can I write it is a neurotoxic as well? So if I ask you the function, of botulinum exotoxin, it has got 2 effects. One is it causes food poisoning, and it is a neurotoxin as well. Out of these 8 types, out of all these 8 different types of botulinum exotoxins, which is the one that is responsible for causing food poisoning? that is botulinum exotoxin C2. C2 type of botulinum exotoxin, the C2 variant, this is responsible for causing food poisoning. Then what about the remaining? The remaining A, B, C1, D, E, F, G, all of them are neurotoxic. Right? So most of the students, they think botulinum is responsible for causing food poisoning. But actual thing is that there is only one type of toxin that is responsible for causing food poisoning, that is C2. Remaining most of the toxins of botulinum, the remaining 7 types of botulinum toxins, they are mainly responsible for causing neurotoxicity. Right? I hope you understood this. Fine. Another important thing, point number 5 I want to discuss is that in the starting I told these clostridial species are what type of organisms? Aerobic or anaerobic? Very good. They are anaerobic organisms, right? Anaerobic organisms. So I promised to tell you in the beginning that anaerobic organisms, they live in the presence of oxygen or absence of oxygen. They live in the absence of oxygen. So when they're living in the absence of oxygen, I also told you that if you try to provide oxygen to these organisms die immediately. And what is the reason behind that? Now I'm going to tell you the reason behind that. For example, if you are giving oxygen to me, if you are providing oxygen to me, so what will I do is I'll take oxygen inside my body, right? And this oxygen inside my body will be automatically converted to this molecule. Wherever you see a dot, that is called as a free radical. And this molecule is what type of free radical? This is called as superoxide ion, or not ions, superoxide radical. This is called as superoxide radical. Next, this O2 dot, which is superoxide radical, will later on be converted to H2O2. H2O2, all of you know it is hydrogen peroxide. H2O2, on one side, it will be converted to water. On the other side, it will be converted to OH dot. What does OH dot stand for? It stands for hydroxyl radical. Hydroxyl radical. Now, what I'm exactly trying to explain you. Listen, guys. When you provide oxygen to me, there are two reactive oxygen species, or there are two free radicals that are formed in my body. One thing, before I further continue, you should know that free radicals are the most dangerous elements in your body. All of you know that. Because free radicals, they damage your RBC. They cause hemolysis. So, instead of free radical, to prevent those free radicals cause hemolysis in my body, what my body is trying to do is, time to time, whatever superoxide radical is formed, that is immediately converted to H2O2, and H2O2 is immediately converted to water. All of you know H2O2 and water are non-toxic compounds. They are not superoxides, or they are not free radicals, right? Now, how superoxide is getting converted to H2O2? It is because of an enzyme, and the name of the enzyme is superoxide dimutase. And what is converting H2O2 to H2O? That is catalase. So, if I don't have superoxide dimutase in my body, if I don't have catalase in my body, and now you are providing oxygen to me, that oxygen will be converted to superoxide radical. As I don't have superoxide dimutase, superoxide radical cannot be converted to H2O2. So what will happen? The level of superoxide radicals start building up in my body, and these free radicals start damaging my RBC, starts damaging my DNA, starts damaging the lipid, right? You understood this, right? On the other hand, H2O2 is converted to hydroxyl radical, and H2O2 is converted to water. If I don't have catalase, what will happen? The reaction, instead of converting it into water, it will go into other way by converting it into hydroxyl radical. So again, the same story. Radicals are formed in my body. Hydroxyl radicals are formed in my body. Again, they start damaging my RBC. So what is my main intention here to tell you is that anaerobic organisms lack superoxide dismutase and catalase. Let me write it down. These anaerobic organisms, they lack two enzymes, and these two enzymes are superoxide dismutase and catalase. So these organisms, they lack superoxide dismutase and catalase. So when they lack superoxide dismutase and catalase, if you are trying to provide oxygen to them, in the bacteria, within the bacteria, these superoxide radical and hydroxyl radical are formed. They start building up and finally they damage the DNA. And finally what will happen? They damage the DNA of the bacteria. So let me write in another way. So what will happen when they lack these enzymes? For example, if this is your bacteria over here, right? So this is your bacteria. So what is going to happen? The bacteria is going to be killed. How? Because the bacteria's DNA, the bacteria's proteins, right, and the bacteria's lipid, all of these things will be damaged. Damaged by what? Damaged by free radicals. Okay, that is the reason why Clostridium botulinum or Clostridium tetani, right, they live deep inside the soil, because deep inside the soil you don't have oxygen, and that is a favorable environment for these organisms to live. Okay, that is why when you have deep cut wounds in your body, for example, when you have open cut surface of the wounds, and if there is sand entry into your body, so obviously you will be affected with Clostridium tetani. Clear now? Right. Next important thing, the factors, once let us sum up all of them. It is a gram-positive rod, right? It is a gram-positive rod. It is an anaerobic organisms, and you know the shapes now. Keep in mind, guys, shapes form, they can ask you a question regarding the shapes. They are very important. Next, you also came to know about this botulinum exotoxin. This is also a question, right? So which of the following is causing food poisoning? That is C2 type. And the remaining are neurotoxins. Right. Why anaerobic organisms die in the presence of oxygen? Because these anaerobic organisms, they lack superoxide dismutase and catalase enzymes. So these are some properties which you need to know. Now, after discussing the properties, let us go with the risk factors. Let us go with the risk factors. What are the risk factors? Are, for example, if you are lazy enough to cook the food and if you start eating canned foods or processed foods, if you are eating canned foods, right, or processed foods. So these canned foods or processed foods are more likely to have this pathogen, and obviously when you eat, the pathogen enters into your body and starts releasing exotoxin, that is the botulinum exotoxin, and it affects your body. Now how does it affect? What are the effects? What is the pathogenesis? I'll discuss them in a minute. Second thing, another important cause can be ingestion of raw honey. Not only that, even contaminated wounds also. So out of all these three, which is the most common? If you ask me, raw honey ingestion is the most common form. Now, after the risk factors is done, let us right now enter into the real part of the topic. The real part of the topic is that this botulism, right, how many types is it of? Botulism is basically of three types, guys. Botulism is basically of three types. So let me write it down. Botulinum is basically three different types. Now what are these three different types? Now in the first type, look here. this is a bowl over here, and a food is being served for you. So this is the food, for example, let us say, and this pink colored dots which I'm drawing here, guys, these pink colored dots represent exotoxin. That is the botulinum exotoxin. Bacteria has released botulinum exotoxin, and that exotoxin is located on this food now. Let me write it down. This is called as your exotoxin. Botulinum exotoxin. Now, I can't see it with my naked eye. So what will I do is I slightly ingest this food. So when I ingest this food, what is happening? What I am going to do? I am ingesting what? Ingestion of exotoxin. So when I ingest exotoxin, what is going to happen is within 12 to 36 hours, the symptoms appear. Within 12 to 36 hours, the symptoms appear. What are the symptoms? I'll tell you now. Right. So this type of botulinum, this type of botulism, where the symptoms appear after 12 to 36 hours after ingestion of the food containing exotoxin, this is called as adult form of botulism. This is called as adult form of botulism. Right? This is called as adult form of botulism, or this is also called as classic form of botulism. Why do you call it as classic form of botulism? Because you are ingesting exotoxins. And why do you call it as adult form of botulism? Because this type of botulism is most commonly found in adults. So if I ask you, what is the most common type of botulism seen in adults? It is classic botulism. Most common botulism seen in adults is classic botulism. What is the cause of classic botulism? Ingestion of exotoxin within the food. Ingestion of exotoxin in the food causes classic botulism. Now let us enter into the next type. In this next type is that if botulism affects the infants, so what do you call it as? You call it as infantile botulism. Infantile botulism. You call this as infantile botulism. If the botulism affects the children, that is the newborn, you call it as infantile botulism. Right. Now, listen very carefully. A newborn cannot eat a rice. Right? A newborn cannot eat rice. A neonate cannot eat rice. So what do you feed the newborn? You feed with raw honey. I mean, you mix the honey in the cereals or the milk or whatever it is, and you feed the newborn. So raw honey is said to be most commonly contaminated with this Clostridium botulinum spores. I told you in the previous lecture of Clostridium tetani that almost all the Clostridium species releases spores, and these spores are heat liable. So raw honey is contaminated with this clostridial spores. So when you are feeding the infant, the spores are entering into the body, right? So raw honey ingestion. So you are feeding the infant with the raw honey. So raw honey is contaminated with the spores. So what will happen? The spores enter into the body. And where do these spores go? They go to the large bowel. Okay, fine. The spores enter into the large bowel, and what do? The spores, they colonize in the large bowel, and now slowly these spores start releasing exotoxin. The spores start releasing exotoxin. What is the difference between the classical and the infantile? In classical, you are directly ingesting exotoxin, but here you are first ingesting the spores, and these spores are entering into the large bowel, and in the large bowel, they are releasing exotoxin. So what is important here? The important is most common cause of infantile botulism is most common cause of infantile botulism is raw honey ingestion. Any book you refer, you will find the most common cause of this infantile botulism is raw honey ingestion. Most common cause, right? Another important thing, where is it going to colonize? This is a question. It is going to colonize in the large bowel. This is going to colonize it within the large bowel, and in the large bowel, what is it going to release? That is exotoxin. Clear so far? Right. Now, what is the third type of botulism? Third type of botulism is called as wound botulism. Wound botulism. I told you in the starting, in the risk factors, that contaminated wounds also are responsible for causing botulism. So wound botulism, right? And this is happening because of what? It is happening because of contaminated wounds, right? So let me make a line over here to avoid confusion. Fine. If I ask you few questions, let us write down few questions, guys, here for your exam point of view. Most common type of botulism. What is the most common type of botulism? You got three types: classic, infantile, wound. Out of these three, what is the most common type? The most common type is infantile. Infantile botulism is the most common type. Second important thing, not most common now, the rare type of botulism. Rarest type of botulism. What is the rarest type of botulism? That is your wound botulism. Wound botulism is the rare form of botulism. Third important thing, most common cause of infantile botulism. Most common cause of infantile botulism. What is the most common cause? Ingestion of what? Ingestion of honey. Right? Which age group do you most commonly see this classic botulism? So, classic botulism is most commonly seen in which age group? Adults. That is why you call it as adult botulism. Right? So, next thing. In classic botulism is caused by ingestion of spores or exotoxins. Obviously, ingestion of exotoxin. Whereas infantile botulism is caused by ingestion of spores or exotoxins. Obviously, it will be spores. Right? So everything is important. These are some of the important points. Right. We have discussed the initial graph. We have discussed the properties. We have also discussed which toxin is responsible for food poisoning and which toxin is responsible for neurotoxicity. We have also discussed what is the reason behind anaerobic organisms dying if you are providing oxygen. You know what enzymes lack there. And we have also discussed the risk factors, and we have discussed the most important part of the topic, that is types of botulism. Right. So now we shall be discussing, we have discussed till the different types of botulism, and we have also discussed the important points for your exams. Now we shall be focusing on what is the pathogenesis, how Clostridium botulism is going to affect your body, and what are the different types of effects. Right, guys? Now stop writing the notes. So pay attention to what I'm telling you now, because this pathogenesis will play a very important role and make you understand the symptoms. Right? So let us discuss pathogenesis. It is very interesting, guys. The pathogenesis is really very interesting, and even at the end I'll compare it with the Clostridium tetani also. You'll very clearly understand what I'm trying to tell you. Right. Now, coming to the pathogenesis, one basic thing all of you have to know is that this is a presynaptic neuron. Right? This is a presynaptic neuron. Let us say not that, but let me draw it little big, yeah. Now here we have got a molecule that is called as acyl CoA, right? Acetyl CoA combines with another molecule called as choline. Acyl CoA combines with another molecule called choline, and together they form acetylcholine. Okay, and this acyl CoA combines with choline, and now it forms acetylcholine. And this acetylcholine is stored in the vesicle. Okay, and this acetylcholine has also got a molecule like this. This molecule is called as synaptobrevin. This is called as synaptobrevin. On the surface of the presynaptic neuron, here we have got some ion gated channels, and these ion gated channels also have got some proteins. Now these proteins are called as these drumstick like proteins, which are close to one another. These are called as syntaxin molecules. So synaptobrevin and syntaxin together, they are called as snare proteins. They are called as snare proteins. Okay, they are called as snare proteins. So obviously I'll tell you how is this going to happen, that all of you know that within the presynaptic neuron, I mean within this neuron which I have drawn, there is heavy amount of calcium, right? There is heavy amount of calcium. So there is calcium everywhere. Calcium is Ca+2. Calcium everywhere. So one calcium ion attaches here, +2. Another calcium attaches on the other side of syntaxin molecules. So this is one syntaxin, this is one syntaxin. Here I have calcium, here I have calcium. So calcium is positive charge. There is positive here, positive here. Positive, positive, what will happen? Positive, they are like this. Positive, positive, they repel. So both the syntaxin molecules, they repel out. So how will the picture look when both the syntaxin molecules, they repel out? This is how the picture looks when the syntaxin molecules, they repel out. So when they repel out, what will happen? This acetylcholine, I mean the vesicle containing acetylcholine, right, is having which molecule there? Synaptobrevin. Now it repelled out like this. The two syntaxin molecules repelled out. Now this is the acetylcholine vesicle, and this acetylcholine vesicle is having what is this molecule? Synaptobrevin. Now it will fix into this, and when it fixes into this, now look what is going to happen. It is going to release the neurotransmitter. The vesicle is going to burst out and it releases the neurotransmitter. So what will happen overall? The neurotransmitter is released here. This neurotransmitter is acetylcholine. And what is acetylcholine responsible for? Acetylcholine is responsible for muscle contraction. Muscle contraction. So this is the basic thing which happens in you and me, and everyone has to know. Now let us enter into some more detailed part and discuss exactly what is happening. Exactly what is happening. Now, this is your stomach. And this is your duodenum. All of you very well know that here we have got our intestinal cells like this. So these are our intestinal cells. Let us say these are our intestinal cells, right? And let us say that this is your blood vessel like this. This is your blood vessel. And another picture, let us draw that this is your presynaptic neuron. This is your presynaptic neuron. Okay, this is your presynaptic neuron. Now, keep in mind one thing. How does Clostridium botulinum enter into your body? Either by ingestion of raw honey or by contaminated foods or the canned foods, right? So I'm lazy enough to cook, so finally I ate the canned food. I ate the canned food in the morning, afternoon and night, and increased my chances or risks of this Clostridium botulinum, and finally successfully by night Clostridium botulinum entered into my body. So I am an adult. So obviously what type of botulinum will I have? I will have classic form of botulism. In this classic form of botulism, am I ingesting spores or exotoxin? I am ingesting the exotoxin. Keep in mind one thing. This exotoxin is like this. This is the shape of exotoxin. It has got A subunit. This is called as the A subunit. It is also called as a B subunit. One is called short chain, one is called long chain. But whatever it is, so we ingested exotoxins successfully. We ingested exotoxin. Now this exotoxin, slowly it enters into the mucosal cells. It enters into the intestinal epithelial cells. So finally the exotoxin successfully entered into the intestinal epithelial cells. After entering into intestinal epithelial cells, from there they enter into your blood circulation. So the exotoxin right now is in your blood circulation like this. Look here now. It is in your blood circulation, right? So let me put a circle around it, right? So this is an exotoxin. Now this exotoxin, what is it going to do is that this exotoxin will travel all the way. It will travel all the way. This exotoxin will travel all the way till the synaptic cleft, and then this exotoxin will enter into the presynaptic neuron. So this is how the exotoxin is entering into the presynaptic neuron. And what is going to happen? These A subunit and the B subunit, they detach like this. Okay, so A subunit and B subunit have been detached like this. Now look the thing that is going to happen. All of you know that you have got ACH molecule, that is acetylcholine molecule here. All of you know that there are ion gated channels, and these ion gated channels are having two molecules, and these two molecules are called as syntaxin molecules. And what is the molecule that is located on ACH? This is called synaptobrevin molecule. Both of them are called as, they are called as snare proteins. Listen very carefully. This A subunit, leave about the B subunit. This A subunit, what it will do is it will damage synaptobrevin, it will damage syntaxin molecule. So when synaptobrevin and syntaxin are damaged, do you think acetylcholine will fix inside and break the vesicle and acetylcholine will be released outside? No, acetylcholine cannot be released outside. Acetylcholine is an activatory neurotransmitter. It cannot be released outside now. Right? So it is like this now. It is completely naked. There is no synaptobrevin, there is no syntaxin. So you cannot release acetylcholine outside. Right? Now when acetylcholine cannot be released outside, look what is going to happen. Let us say this is another neuron, right? And this neuron is called as alpha motor neuron. And this alpha motor neuron is responsible for muscle contraction. So when will the muscle contract? The muscle will contract when alpha motor neuron is activated, because alpha motor neuron ends up in the muscles. You activate alpha motor neuron, you are contracting the muscle. But to activate this alpha motor neuron, you need acetylcholine. But in this case, is the patient having acetylcholine? I am rubbing the acetylcholine, which means there is no acetylcholine here. When there is no acetylcholine here, alpha motor neuron doesn't work, so muscle contraction will not happen. When muscle contraction will not happen, can I call it as paralysis? Yes. So I can call this condition as paralysis. But what type of paralysis? Because previously we discussed in Clostridium tetani that patient is having paralysis where all his muscles get contracted for a long time. That is called spastic, strong, contracted paralysis. That is spastic paralysis. But here, muscle contraction is not there. Muscles become so weak, so loose, you can't even lift your hand. You won't have any facial expression. You won't even have ability to lift your eyelids. All the muscles are weak, flaccid, floppy, right? They're drooling, they're dripping down. So such weak paralysis is called as flaccid paralysis. That is called as flaccid paralysis, right? So one very important thing I want to tell you, that in case of Clostridium tetani, there was severe contraction, and that paralysis is called spastic paralysis. All of you think paralysis means your arms and legs won't work, that is called paralysis. No. Even if the muscles are getting contracted for a long time, that is also called paralysis. Even if the muscles are not at all contracting, that is also called paralysis. But if they're contracting too heavily, it is spastic paralysis. If they are not at all contracting, muscles become weak, that is called flaccid paralysis. Right? And where do you see this flaccid paralysis? You see flaccid paralysis in case of Clostridium botulinum. So these are very, very important thing, guys. Very, very important things. High yield concepts. This is very, very important thing you need to remember. Definitely. Okay? Fine. Cool. Now, you told me that patient is going to have paralysis. Fine. You told me that patient is going to have flaccid paralysis in case of Clostridium botulinum. Very good, fine. Sir, but you get a paralysis patient to me. You get a patient having flaccid paralysis in front of me. Now, by looking at that patient, I'll decide that he is having flaccid paralysis. But how will I know that whether this flaccid paralysis is because of Clostridium tetani or whether this flaccid paralysis is because of Guillain-Barré syndrome? Because even in Guillain-Barré syndrome, you have got flaccid paralysis. So just by looking at the patient having flaccid paralysis, how am I going to differentiate between Clostridium botulinum and Guillain-Barré syndrome? How am I going to differentiate is that in Clostridium botulinum, this type of paralysis is called as descending paralysis. This type of paralysis is called as descending paralysis. What do I mean by descending paralysis? The paralysis starts in the cranial nerves. The paralysis starts in the cranial nerves. From the cranial nerves, the paralysis will come to the upper extremity. After upper extremity, the paralysis will go down to the respiratory muscles. After respiratory muscles, it goes down to lower extremity. Right? So first, the paralysis you see in cranial nerves. After that, you see it in upper extremity. Then slowly, gradually, the paralysis will go down to respiratory muscles and finally to the lower extremity. So such type of paralysis is called as descending paralysis. Whereas in Guillain-Barré syndrome, the paralysis which you see is called as ascending paralysis. Ascending paralysis. So can I tell Guillain-Barré syndrome is a differential diagnosis of Clostridium botulinum? Yes. So if someone asks you that you see flaccid paralysis in both these cases, how are you going to differentiate? That is, in botulinum there is descending paralysis, Guillain-Barré there is ascending paralysis. The paralysis starts in the lower limbs in Guillain-Barré, slowly it goes to the respiratory muscles, abdominal muscles, then to the head and the neck, upper extremity, and it goes up. Fine, we have discussed enough, guys. Now let us focus on the last part of our topic, that is, what are the symptoms? Let us discuss the signs and symptoms. Now, whenever I discuss symptoms, the first thing which you see here is, as you are ingesting the exotoxin, in the previous picture there up above I told you, you are ingesting the exotoxin, right? So what are you ingesting? You are ingesting exotoxin because you are an adult, you are ingesting exotoxin. So obviously when the exotoxin enters into your intestine, it will definitely damage your intestine. So you will definitely have what? You will definitely have GI upset. So the first point is gastrointestinal upset. Coming to the second point. Second point is, in this patient, the muscles become weak. Why? Because of lack of ACH. When the muscles become weak, muscles of your eyeball, That is called ocular muscles. What are the ocular muscles? Superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial rectus, lateral rectus. So all the ocular muscles also become weak. So when the ocular muscles become weak, they fail to contract properly. When they fail to contract properly, patient can have a double vision. So patient can have a double vision, which is also called as diplopia, right? So which is also called as diplopia. Next, patients buccal muscles responsible for talking, the pharyngeal muscles, everything, all the muscles of the mouth, even they become paralyzed, they become weak. So do you think patient will have a proper voice? No. This is called as dysarthria. Dysarthria. Next, muscles in the sense not only your biceps, triceps, guys. Muscles in the sense even your GI muscles. Your stomach, esophagus, all of them are lined by smooth muscles. Even they stop working. They stop contracting. They stop peristalsis. So what will happen? Can the patient eat properly? Even if he eats, can the food descends down properly? No. So patient will have dysphagia. And finally, even the respiratory muscles don't work. That is your intercostal muscles, your pectoralis, all of these respiratory muscles don't work. So patient cannot breathe the inside, cannot voluntarily contract his muscles. The diaphragm muscle also doesn't work. It becomes weak. So when you inspire the air, these muscles don't work. So you can't inspire enough amount of air into your lungs. And that what causes dyspnea in the patient. So if you look at clearly, D for diplopia, D for dysarthria, D for dysphagia, and D for dyspnea. So there are 4 D symptoms. Not only that, not only these, patient's facial muscles also won't work. So patient will have facial weakness. Facial weakness. What did I tell you? These are called as palpebra, right? Eyelids. The muscles that is called as a palpebral muscle. Even this muscle doesn't work. The patient's eyes will be like this. I mean, drooping down. This is called as drooping eyelids. Drooping eyelids. Right? So these are the symptoms which you see in adults, most commonly in everyone. But there are some special symptoms, guys, which you see in neonates. What are the symptoms, special symptoms which you see in neonates? When there is infantile what? Infantile botulism. Right. First thing is an infant has to pass meconium. How does the infant pass meconium? Only when there is peristalsis of his intestine, he passes meconium. Right? So even after that, okay, leave that meconium. Obviously, every infant will pass meconium. After the baby's birth, you feed the infant with the honey. After 1 day or 2 days, you start seeing that the baby is not defecating. Why? Because within the baby, the muscles became weak, there is no acetylcholine, so there is no peristalsis. So when there is no peristalsis, the baby will be having what? The baby will be having constipation. If someone asks you what is the first sign in infantile botulism, the first sign in infantile botulism is constipation. This is the first sign. Very important, guys. Very important. This is the first sign. Second thing, is the baby going to tell you, hey dog, look, I am not able to contract my muscles. Maybe I've got Clostridium botulinum. No. Neonate only cries, right? So how are you going to identify? How are you going to identify is based upon the sucking capacity of the milk. As the muscles become weak, do you think the baby can suck the milk? No. So can I write it as poor feeding? Why poor feeding? Because of diminished sucking. Diminished suck. Third thing, as the muscles are not working, the tongue, even the tongue muscles, even the glossopharyngeal, all the muscles that are responsible for the movement of your tongue, right? The styloglossus, the glossus, the hyoglossus. So all of these muscles, even they stop working, and there is no proper control of the mouth. So all the time the saliva comes out of the mouth. This is called as drooling. This is called as drooling. And finally, as all the muscles in the neonate become weak, the baby also becomes loose, right? For example, I'm standing like this. But if I have botulism, for example, if I am a small baby and if I have botulism, then I droop down like this. I become floppy like this, weak like this, loose like this. So if these things are happening in a baby, that is called as floppy baby syndrome. Floppy baby syndrome. Okay, floppy baby syndrome. Right. So if you look at the pictures, guys, if you look at the pictures, you will very well understand what I'm trying to explain here. Look at the first picture here. This picture number 1, picture number 2, picture number 3. In picture number 1, the baby is not sleeping actually. The baby is flopping down, you know. The baby's muscles are so loose, so weak, right? So this is called as floppy baby syndrome. This baby is called as floppy baby. This picture and this picture. Look at the eyelids of this guy. Picture number 3. The eyelids are drooping down. So this is called as drooping eyelids. Drooping eyelids. Very good. Fine. And the last important thing I want to discuss is that, guys, is this Clostridium botulinum so dangerous? Is it really so dangerous? Yes, it is really so dangerous, but Clostridium botulinum also does some good things. What does that good things? The good thing that Clostridium botulinum does is that it weakens your muscle. What? It weakens your muscle. So why is it called to be a good thing? Why is it called to be a good thing? Because nowadays scientists are developing some injections. And what are these injections are? For example, if there are any contractions in your body, let us say muscle spasm. So if I give this injection, the muscle will become weak and relaxed. So I can use this in case of muscle spasm. Such injections in case of muscle spasm. I can also use, there is a condition where your esophagus, okay, let me write down and then I'll explain. There is a condition called achalasia cardia. Achalasia cardia. And there is also another condition called diffuse esophageal spasm. So diffuse esophageal spasm, achalasia cardia and muscle spasm, in all these cases, these all are contractile cases. In all these cases, I use some injections called as Botox injections. Botox injections. Now let us look at the picture here. Look at an X-ray, barium minima X-ray of the esophagus here. Look at the esophagus here. Normal esophagus has to be like this. This is the normal esophagus and this is the stomach over here. In the lower region here, this red color thing which I am drawing, this is called as a sphincter, which is present on the lower side. So I call it as lower esophageal sphincter. Right? Basically, this lower when the food goes inside the stomach, the lower esophageal sphincter closes so that the food will not regurgitate back. But in this condition, what happens is, in these patients of achalasia cardia, the lower esophageal sphincter contracts and does not relax. It does not open up. Even if it opens very mildly. So, in patients with achalasia cardia, the lower esophageal sphincter, it fails to relax. It fails to relax. So when it will fail to relax, whatever food you have eaten, it will accumulate in the esophagus, causing dilation of the esophagus. So if I draw a picture of that, how does it look? Look here. This is the sphincter over here. This is another sphincter over here, right? Look at the esophagus, how dilated it is. Now look at the same picture above. So this is your esophagus, guys. This is your esophagus. How grossly dilated it is. And this is a sphincter which has been constricted. So what I'm doing is, if I give a Botox injection there, the sphincter will relax and the food will easily go. So can I use Botox injections in case of achalasia cardia? Yes. On the other hand, look at the esophagus there. The esophagus is in the form of a wave. Why? Because there is a spasm here, there is a spasm here, there is a spasm here always, there is a spasm here, here. So diffusely along the entire length of the esophagus, there is spasm everywhere. So can I call this as diffuse esophageal spasm? And in this diffuse esophageal spasm, if I give Botox injection, the spasm will come back to its normal position and you find the normal, you get your normal shape of the esophagus. Right? Cool. So let us discuss now the final part. For example, if someone need an emergency, the immediate action which we take is we give an antitoxin. But anyways guys, there are treatments. For example, if a baby who is less than 1 year of life, if he is affected, no, this is not 7, I'm sorry, this is 1, less than 1 year of life, if the baby is less than 1 year of life and is affected with this Clostridium tetani, so the treatment which we give is bivalent human derived antitoxin. For example, if the baby is more than 1 year, right, more than 1 year, then I change the toxin, that is called as equine derived heptavalent antitoxin. So less than 1 year, age less than 1 year, you give bivalent human derived antitoxin. If the age is more than 1 year, then you give equine derived heptavalent antitoxin. Right? So guys, we are done with the discussion of Clostridium botulinum. Now the last point I want to discuss and close this lecture is that this is a very, very important point, that is the differences between Clostridium tetani, which we discussed in our last class, and Clostridium botulinum. What are the main differences? What is the toxin that is released in tetany? Yes, that is called as tetanospasmin. What was the toxin that is released here? That is called as botulinum exotoxin. Obviously, both of them are exotoxins. Next, what is the mechanism? The mechanism is that both of them, they damage what proteins? Snare proteins. Both damage or cleave snare proteins. The pathogenesis is same, right? But what is the difference in the pathogenesis? The difference in the pathogenesis is that Clostridium tetani toxin, whatever is there, that is a tetanospasmin, it prevents the release of what? It prevents the release of what neurotransmitter? Activator or inhibitory? Inhibitory neurotransmitter. Inhibitory neurotransmitter. And what is that inhibitory neurotransmitter, please? That is GABA, or it can be glycine. Whereas on the other hand, it prevents the release of activatory or inhibitory. Prevents release of activatory neurotransmitter. And what is the name of this activatory neurotransmitter? Acetylcholine. And the last point, guys, last point I want you guys to tell, that is what type of paralysis you see here? Spastic paralysis. Spastic paralysis. And what type of paralysis you see here? That is flaccid paralysis. So if I ask you one more extra point, tell me about Clostridium botulinum regarding the paralysis, you would tell me ascending or descending? Obviously it is a descending type of paralysis. So here guys, we close the topic Clostridium botulinum. Thank you.